party, I started at 350,000, 370,000, 400,000 on the telephone.
In 1987, Sotheby's auctioned one of the greatest pieces of jewelry by an individual. The collection also represents a lifetime of love. The Duke of Windsor's gift to a woman he loved more than the crown. The intimate secrets of their relationship, expressed by an inscription in the jewels given in the early years.
I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility.
This is a love story.
Without the help and support of the woman I love.
But it is not the story we always thought it was. Wallis Simpson, Duchess of Windsor, was a sensation. To some, she was the Scarlet Woman who lured Edward VIII from his throne, but to others it was the greatest romance. A woman and men who sacrificed everything for each other. The relationship between the Duke and Duchess of Windsor was called the most beautiful love story of the 20th century by the tabloids. The incredible story of a couple in love, who united their destinies for life, is inextricably intertwined with the history of some magnificent jewelry that is still legendary even today. Prince Edward gave Wallis the Prince of Wales brooch in 1935. It is an important piece of jewelry which bears special meaning since it is the symbol of his royal status as the Prince of Wales, the heir to the throne of England, and demonstrates his commitment to her, and his intention to make Wallis his future queen. The brooch was specially commissioned by Prince Edward, and features 3 paved set diamond feathers, accented with baguette-cut diamonds, which are gathered together by a crown. The piece is set in platinum and 18K gold. After the death of the Duchess, the Prince of Wales brooch was purchased by Elizabeth Taylor at the Sotheby's auction for a price over $623,000.
$300,000 to the gentleman on the
There was a
telephone.
flurry of competing bids in the room, but the bidder on the phone from America was determined to defeat all comers.
520,000, 700,000, 800,000, 850,000. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for 850,000 then, for 850,000, all finished this time, as usual, JB.
The initials JB disguised E.T. Elizabeth Taylor, who in the 1960s with her husband Richard Burton became friends with the Windsors and went to their Mills house near Paris. Miss Taylor said she bought the Prince of Wales brooch out of regard for the Windsors and because of her late former husband Welsh nationality. It is said that the brooch is the first piece of significant jewelry that she had ever bought for herself. Ultimately, upon the death of Elizabeth in 2011, the Prince of Wales brooch was once again sold at the Christie's auction of Taylor's jewelry collection for $1,314,500. Ninth on our list is the love affair jewelries. Freda Dudley Ward was one of the princess lover. Thelma Furness another, both were married. Mrs. Wallis Simpson on the other hand had been married twice before he met her in 1931. She was an American from Baltimore. The prince's father, King George V, had her past investigated, and he concluded that she was totally unsuitable to be queen. By 1934 the couple were taking holidays abroad together and the prince started giving her jewels. First was a charmed bracelet and each piece was inscribed with an intimate message.
The inscriptions tell us a lot about the relationship, this adoring relationship that the king had for Mrs. Simpson, that's expressed in those letters as well. These expressions that he used more and more, Enum, these little private words to each other, And it must have been extraordinary to think that she went out in society as another man's wife with her husband, and yet next to her skin was a jewel which carried this very personal and private inscription.
It was when Mrs. Simpson dripping with expensive jewels that London society really began to gossip. They could only come from the prince, but the insurance premiums were paid by Ernest Simpson, her husband. Their happiness didn't last. In January 1936, King George V died. The prince had to face reality. He was now king and emperor.
Edward, Albert, Christian, George, Andrew, Patrick, David.
8th on our list is the Ruby of Love set. The set was collected over the years of courtship and marriage life of the two. It all began when Edward was proclaimed king. As the new sovereign watched his own proclamation, few saw Mrs. Simpson besides him. No one knew he wanted to make her queen, not even Mrs. Simpson was convinced, but the king was determined. To prove it, he showered her with jewels. A diamond bracelet with 40 cushion rubies with an inscription in his own hand which implored her to stay. More Burma rubies in a matching beautiful necklace, with a pair of earrings that was given to her on her birthday. The precious stones were gifts from Indian Maharajas when he was heir to the throne. Discretion is the jeweller's code. But this rare bill shows the king's gift that spring, which cost £16,000, that is worth in millions in today's price. And yet he was still worried that he would lose her. People noticed how distracted he was at his first garden party of his reign. He barely acknowledged the debutante. 7th on our list is the diamond bracelet with the Latin crosses. Perhaps one of the most significant jewelry the Duchess of Windsor had in her possession until the day she died. This bracelet is a testament of their love. Each of the cross tells a significant story of their life as a couple. It is inscribed in letters that both of them created. The bracelet was sold twice, first in 1987, second in 2010, and it was bought by the superstar.
I was always fascinated by the story of the Duke and the Duchess. Every time I'd go out to dinner, I'd bring up their name at a dinner party, and it would be like throwing a Molotov cocktail onto the table. Suddenly, the table would erupt, and everyone would get into an argument about who they were. As I read their story, my feelings toward them kept changing. One minute, I was, enthralled and swept up in it, and then the next minute, I was kind of irritated with them and thinking of them as superficial. And then the next minute, I thought, oh my God, they're human beings like all of us. This guy gave up the throne. What drove him to do that? If it was for a woman and if it was for love, what did this woman have?
6th on the list is the beautiful emerald and diamond ring. Balmoral, their last carefree moment before the crisis. Wallis was preparing to divorce her husband Ernest Simpson, and this sounded the alarm in Downing Street. Stanley Baldwin, the Prime Minister, asked to see the King.
Was to ask me if I could not take steps to prevent Mrs. Simpson's impending divorce case. Mr. Baldwin, I replied, I cannot interfere with the private lives of my subjects.
But the jewels show that the King was deceiving the Prime Minister. He was deeply involved in the Simpsons' affairs. On the day Mrs. Simpson was granted her divorce in Ipswich, she returned and dined with the King, and on that evening he gave her an emerald ring in which he had been keeping for their engagement. The stone was half of one of the greatest emerald stone in the world, and once been worn by an Indian emperor. This was not the original setting of the emerald. The ring she wore that night has been ordered well before the Simpsons' divorce. It had also been inscribed, "Wallis, we are ours," the date of his proposal October 27, 1936, the same day as her divorce.
The inscriptions express the same thing as the letters. This very sentimental kind of relationship he had with Mrs. Simpson, an adoring relationship, a feeling perhaps more of a son to a mother, a kind of obsession, an extraordinary relationship. And you get the kind of orgasm and frenzy of excitement coming up to the abdication when you get more and more jewels with inscribed on them more and more.
Fifth on our list is the clip. It was the first of its kind made by Van Cleef and Arpels. Armistice Day 1936. With his mother Queen Mary beside him, the King made his last public appearance in London. But Mrs. Simpson dominated his thoughts, and on that very day he bought her a Christmas present. What is special about this diamond and ruby clip is the invisible setting for the rubies. This was one of the first made in this way.
And this was ordered, or this was the Armistice Day 1936? Was that the...
Correct, Armistice Day 1936.
This card was December 17, 1936. Yeah. And it was sold and paid for 1 month sooner. Mm-hmm. That meant they were in a hurry or in a haste.
And time was getting short. If the government won't allow him marry a divorcee, he would abdicate. He told the unemployed in Wales that something would be done for them, but by then he was already negotiating his own income if he had to go. He sold Sandringham Balmoral to his brother for £1 million. His allowance would be £30,000 per year, then he abdicate.
But you must believe me when I tell you that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love.
Fourth on our list is the magnificent sapphires and diamond bracelet. In May, Mrs. Simpson's divorce was absolute, and the newly created Duke of Windsor arrived in France to join his bride. His destination was Château de Condé, where Wallis was waiting. On June the 3rd they were married, but the day before they have received a devastating blow. His younger brother, now king, has sent words that Wallis will never be granted the title Her Royal Highness. It would rankle with them both for the rest of their lives. She wore a dress with blue crate, which become known as Wallis Blue. With it the jewels most precious to her, the bracelet of Latin crosses. The 8th one, the marriage cross, was now added. And his wedding present, a fabulous bracelet which the Duke himself had helped to design and made. 45 invisibly set sapphires, and a subtle diamond strap. It was inscribed for our contract with the date they were given permission to marry in France. And a platinum wedding ring inscribed, Wallis your David. Third on the list are the fabulous cats from Cartier. People who move in their circle within the 1940s and 50s remembered the stir she created when she first wore the famous cat jewelry by Cartier. Better than anything else, they capture the Duchess's style. In the year she wore them, life was one long party. With no job to do, they became the uncrowned leaders of café society. She loved the cats, and she loved Paris, where they came from. She would really like to live at the Ritz all her life. Their suite has just been restored the way it was after the Windsor have lived there after the war. One of its attraction was the view that they have at the Place Vendôme. The square is home to the world's most expensive house of jewelers. The Duke had been coming here for years, long before he had met Mrs. Simpson. In the 1920s, the cartoonies saw him as the Prince Charming of the Rue de la Paix, the Cartier headquarter. It was here that the Panther collection was created. The Duke became an expert on jewels. He helped Cartier legendary designer Jean Toussaint with the original conception. 80 years later, Cartier craftsmen are still making them. Today there is production line and no shortage of customers for the style the Windsors inspired. Many of the Duchess jewels were stolen in the 1946. The Panthers were the first of the new jewels. The Duke said the cats would guard her collection. They are still created in gold, emerald, diamond, and onyx, but even this can't match the workmanship of the Duchess's original.
Very much decadent animals of the interior, not really wild jungle animals at all. They're the kind of panthers that would be kept on a leash in somebody's palazzo. I find a very strong sexual charge in all these jewels. I think in a way the jewels tell us what we'll never know, that secret, intimate side of the Windsors that everyone has always speculated about. I think it comes out in the jewels.
And second on our list is the Brooch collection. Wallis has a collection of brooches in her jewelry box, but this three stands among the rest as fabulous. The Cartier Flamingo brooch was commissioned by the Duke of Windsor for the Duchess in 1940, as a birthday gift for her. He had collaborated with Cartier jewelry designer Jean Toussaint. It was completed shortly before the couple had to flee the country during World War II as the Nazis invaded France. The brooch was set in platinum and featured a whimsical flamingo perched on one leg. The flamingo's body, head, neck and legs are paved set with diamonds. The flamingo has one sapphire eye, a yellow citrine, and blue sapphire form its beak. The tail feathers of the flamingo were a colorful array of emeralds, rubies and sapphires. The brooch was sold twice, first in 1987 then in 2010. The Cartier brooch was made to commemorate the Duke and Duchess of Windsor's 20th wedding anniversary in 1957. The brooch was designed to incorporate several meaningful symbols that were important to the couple. The heart-shaped brooch is paved set with numerous diamonds. In the center are the intertwined initials W and E, Wallis and Edward, set with caliber-cut emeralds. The Hawaiian flower brooch. It was made by the House of Van Cleef and Arpels with the help from the Windsors, for it's designed. After the sale in 1987, the brooch was never seen again in public. First on our list are the big diamonds. The Americans loved the Windsor and they loved New York, where they found dancing and diamonds.
A kiss of the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. A kiss may be grand, but it won't pay the rental on your humble flat or help you at the automat.
This 5 pieces could easily fetch millions. The McLean diamond, which is from India with a 31-carat VVS clarity, could make more than 25 million. The big stone came from one place, Harry Winston.
Talk to me, Harry Winston, tell me all about it.
The rarest item in the collection is her pair of yellow diamonds clip.
I don't think at this particular time you could find 2 canary diamonds of that size and match them. There might be 1 or 2 around in the world, but I don't know that they are matched, as these 2 are matched into a pair. Those 2 stones are unique and could not be found anywhere in the world. You might have a 50-carat diamond of that color somewhere, but you probably wouldn't have a match for it. And the Duchess wrote to Mr. Winston about them, and she said that the canary diamonds are certainly very interesting and, in my opinion, could not be improved upon. And she went on to relate that I can't think of anything I would rather have than these 2 diamonds, which leads one to pause and reflect if she said that after she met the Prince of Wales. And then she said, I have worn them twice and they have caused a sensation.
What was she like to deal with?
Without being offensive, I'd say she was easier on design than she was on price. And she was a terrible stickler on design.
As they grew older with few family ties, there was no one but themselves to please.
Marvelous years together with those maybe last 10 years before he died. They depended entirely upon each other. They had less parties, their dinner parties were smaller, but they would dress up alone to have dinner alone. And she would be dressed marvelously with her most marvelous jewels. He would be in his smoking jacket. And just to have dinner alone, the 2 of them in the boudoir, they would be dressed up the best they could, one for each other. She with all her jewels, they loved it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the jewels of the Duchess of Windsor.
Geneva, 1,500 people crowded into a circus tent for the greatest jewelry show on earth.
This is the most valuable private collection of jewels to be sold this century.
People have been coming from all over America and waiting 2 or 3 hours to get in.
At 2,600,000 against the telephone now. 2,700,000 on the telephone.
The first Duchess of Windsor, sir, was an unforgettable experience for everyone involved, and certainly a major highlight of my career. From the moment we announced the CERN in January '87, we realised that the amount of press interest alone was going to be phenomenal from all over the world. I mean, it was unprecedented. From the first exhibition that took place at Sotheby's, New York, the queue was so great, it stretched around the entire block. The interest grew and grew and grew, so that actually the actual auction which took place in Geneva, there were hundreds of people in the marquee, connected to another sale room in Geneva, connected by satellite to another sale room in New York. I mean, it was extraordinary. It was the first time ever. It's still the highest value jewelry collection ever sold.
4,300,000 then. Selling, sir, à juger.
The Windsor marriage and the abdication is described as one of the greatest romances of the 20th century. No man ever gave up so much for one woman. He gave up his throne and reigning basically over 2/3 of the world's population for her. And so on every possible anniversary, gifts would come, and they would very often be jewels. The Duchess's collection was a very personal one because on the whole she didn't like traditional and old-fashioned jewellery. She was considered to be an immensely stylish person, very much on the best dressed women's list, and similarly with the jewels. They were created specially for her by the Duke of Windsor. He ordered them, and of course they were living largely in Paris, and so there were lots of very interesting people around who could create very special and rather iconic pieces for her.
When the last of their jewels was sold, only their story will remain.
Lot number 70, I started at 350,000, 370,000, 400,000 on the telephone link with New York.